The moment I held my son Nathan in my arms, everything in my world shifted. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine as sunlight streamed through the hospital window, painting his delicate face in a golden glow. "Hello, little one," I whispered, gently stroking his soft cheek. "I'm your mom, Olivia, and I promise to protect you with everything I have." At 32, I never imagined motherhood would feel like this, a love so fierce it made my chest ache. Nathan yawned, his tiny mouth forming a perfect O, and I smiled through my tears. Despite everything, we'd made it here together. My phone buzzed on the bedside table. The screen lit up with Father and I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Dad. Olivia." His voice was warm but hesitant. "How are you feeling? How's my grandson?" "We're both good. Nathan's sleeping right now. He's perfect, Dad. I can't wait to meet him tomorrow." "I've got the car all set up with the car seat you sent. Thank you." I hesitated. Is Mother coming with you?" There was a pause that told me everything. "Victoria is finishing preparations for Sunday's welcome party. She wants everything to be just right." Of course she did. My mother had always been obsessed with appearances, with everything being just right according to her exacting standards. Standards I'd never quite measured up to. "Dad, are you sure this is a good idea, coming to stay with you and Mother? Maybe I should just get my own place." "Nonsense," he interrupted, his voice suddenly firm. "You're coming home, Olivia. Victoria will come around. She's just adjusting to the idea that her unmarried daughter had gotten pregnant while her fiancé was working overseas. The idea that, once again, I'd failed to meet her expectations." "Okay," I conceded, not having the energy to argue. "We'll see you tomorrow at 10. After hanging up, I gazed at Nathan's peaceful face. "That was your Grandpa Richard," the first told him softly. "He's a kind man, if a bit passive. You'll like him." I stroked his downy hair. "Your dad Thomas would be here if he could. He's saving lives in Sudan with Doctors Without Borders. He cried when I told him about you over a satellite call. A nurse came in to check on us, her smile warm and genuine. Getting some rest, honey? You'll need it." "Trying to," I replied, returning her smile. "Will the father be coming to take you home?" "He's overseas with a medical mission. My father's picking us up tomorrow." "How nice." "Grandpa must be excited." I nodded, not bothering to explain the complications. My father had indeed teared up when I'd shown him Nathan's ultrasound pictures months ago, but that was only when my mother wasn't around to see his reaction. Richard Parker was a respected literature professor at the University of Maryland, beloved by his students for his gentle wisdom and passion for the written word. At home, however, he deferred to Victoria's iron will in almost everything. Sometimes I wondered if he even remembered how to make his own decisions. I loved my father deeply, but his inability to stand up to my mother had shaped my childhood in painful ways, especially when it came to the stark contrast between how she treated me versus my younger sister, Elise. Just thinking about her made my stomach clench. 2 years my junior at 30, she was everything. Our mother valued successful, polished, married to a wealthy surgeon named Marcus. The perfect daughter following the perfect path. When I'd announced my pregnancy, Elise had hugged me and offered congratulations that never quite reached her eyes. Later, I learned through Dad that she and Marcus had been undergoing fertility treatments for years without success. The knowledge had carved a deeper chasm between us, one filled with unspoken resentment and envy. I didn't hate my sister. I just wished we could break free from the toxic competition our mother had fostered between us our entire lives. The next morning, Dad arrived exactly at 10. When I placed Nathan in his arms, his eyes immediately welled with tears. "He's beautiful, Liv," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "He looks just like you did." I squeezed his arm gently. "Thank you, Dad." In the car, I secured Nathan's car seat and climbed in beside him. Dad kept glancing at his grandson in the rearview mirror, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Victoria has been preparing all week for the welcome party," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "Everyone's coming, aunts, uncles, cousins, even the Andersons from next door." My anxiety spiked. "Dad, please tell me honestly, does Mother actually want to throw this party for Nathan and me, or is it just for show?" Dad's eyes briefly met mine in the mirror, and I saw the sadness there. "Liv, your mother, she loves you in her own way. Try to understand. It was his standard response, one I'd heard countless times throughout my life. I nodded silently and turned to look out the window as Maryland's lush countryside rolled past. Tomorrow I would have to stand in a room full of people and pretend we were one big happy family while my mother orchestrated her perfect tableau. As we turned into the long driveway of my childhood home, my heartbeat quickened. The sprawling colonial with its manicured gardens and white columns stood as imposing as ever beautiful, pristine and cold. Just like Victoria Parker, "Here we are," Dad announced with forced brightness. "Let's bring Nathan home." I looked down at my sleeping son and whispered, "It'll be okay, little one. I'm right here with you." But as I stepped out of the car, one couldn't shake the feeling that coming here had been a terrible mistake. The house was exactly as I remembered, immaculate, elegant, and utterly devoid of warmth. Every surface gleamed, every object meticulously placed according to Victoria's exacting standards. Walking through the front door with Nathan felt like bringing a hurricane into a museum. From the next room, I could hear my mother's commanding voice giving instructions to the caterer for tomorrow's party. Not blue tablecloths, pink ones. My daughter had a boy. Get every detail perfect. I rolled my eyes. Of course she was taking charge without even asking what I might want. The Victoria Parker show was beginning right on schedule. "Good morning, Olivia." I turned to find Dad standing in the doorway of the guest room where Nathan and I would be staying. He smiled gently and moved closer to look at his grandson. "He's been in a good mood all morning," I said. "Dad, today is—" "It'll be fine," he interrupted, squeezing my hand. "Today is a special day for you and Nathan. Everything will work out." His words lacked conviction, but I appreciated the attempt. I just wished, for once, he would acknowledge the reality of who Victoria was, instead of always making excuses for her behavior. As I unpacked Nathan's things, I couldn't help wondering how long we would stay here. I had planned on a few weeks at most, just until Thomas returned from Sudan, and we could figure out our next steps together. But already, after less than a day, the familiar weight of my mother's disapproval was settling over me like a shroud. For Nathan's sake, I had to find the strength I'd never had before. This time, I wouldn't let Victoria Parker break me. By 2 o'clock the next day, our house had transformed into a buzzing hive of activity. Relatives streamed through the front door in a parade of pastel summer clothes and gift bags, each one pausing to coo over Nathan as I sat on the living room sofa. "He has your eyes, Olivia," Aunt Sarah said, peering down at him. "But Richard's chin, don't you think?" added Uncle James. I smiled and nodded, but I could feel their curiosity and judgment beneath their congratulations. The unspoken questions hung in the air. "Where is the father? Why aren't you married? What were you thinking?" "Olivia, you look exhausted." My mother's voice cut through the chatter as she approached, wearing an immaculate pale blue dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her silvery blonde hair was swept into a perfect chignon, not a strand out of place. "You should rest a bit. I'll hold Nathan for you." I stared at her in shock. In the 24 hours since our arrival, Victoria had barely acknowledged Nathan's existence, let alone asked to hold him. I hesitated, but with all eyes on us, I carefully transferred my son into her arms. Victoria held him awkwardly, as though he were a strange artifact she wasn't quite sure how to display. With her hostess smile firmly in place, she carried Nathan across the room to show him off to more arriving guests. "Olivia." I turned to see Elise entering the room with her husband Marcus. My sister looked flawless as always in a designer dress, her blonde hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders, pearls gleaming at her throat. We exchanged a stiff hug, her expensive perfume making my nose itch. "Congratulations," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "So you've discovered your maternal instincts at last." "Thank you," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Mother is holding Nathan." Elise's expression darkened momentarily as she turned to look at Victoria cradling my son. "Well, I never imagined Mother becoming a grandmother," she said with a sharp edge to her voice, "especially with you becoming a mother first." The comment stung, laden with the envy and resentment I knew she carried. I understood her pain at not being able to conceive, but her words felt like a slap. "Elise, please," I said quietly, "let's not turn today into a battlefield." She gave me a cold look. "Of course, Today is your special day, after all. I kept my eyes on my mother and Nathan while attempting to make small talk with guests who hadn't seen me since high school. Victoria continued holding him while skillfully working the room, but when he began to fuss, she quickly passed him to a nearby aunt. "Time to open presents," Victoria announced, leading everyone to the backyard where tables had been set up under white canopies. I reclaimed Nathan from my aunt's arms and was guided to a chair before a mountain of gifts. One by one, I opened them while balancing Nathan in one arm. Baby clothes, toys, books, and equipment I wasn't sure I'd ever use. "This one's from Elise and Marcus," Mother said, handing me an elegantly wrapped box. Inside was a set of designer baby clothes that probably cost more than most people's entire baby wardrobes. "These are lovely," I said. "Thank you." I picked them out with Mother. Elise smiled smugly. "I thought you wouldn't be able to choose things worthy of Nathan with your taste." My cheeks burned as laughter rippled through the crowd. Olivia never had any fashion sense. Even as a student, Victoria chimed in cheerfully. "Remember what she wore to her high school graduation? That awful vintage dress. It looked like it came from a thrift store." More laughter followed. I forced a smile while hugging Nathan closer. This was their favorite game, Victoria and Elise ganging up to remind me of my inadequacies for the amusement of others. By late afternoon, I was emotionally drained. Just when I thought the ordeal was finally ending, Victoria raised her champagne glass. "Everyone, please move to the garden patio," she proclaimed. "Our family has a special tradition we observe when welcoming a new life." I looked at her in confusion. In my 32 years, I'd never heard of any such family tradition. "Mother, what tradition?" "We don't have—" "Of course we do," Victoria interrupted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Have you forgotten? Our ancestors believed that water blesses a new baby and cleanses their spirit." I frowned. "Nathan is too small for whatever this is, and I haven't. It's fine," Victoria said, firmly, her voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. "Everyone is looking forward to it. You always disregard family traditions, but just cooperate today." I looked around for Dad, but spotted him deep in conversation with relatives at the far end of the garden. Sighing in defeat, I followed the crowd gathering near the large ornamental pond that was the centerpiece of our backyard garden. Dusk was approaching, painting the sky in soft purples and pinks. The garden lights had come on, illuminating the stone path leading to the water feature. My anxiety grew with each step. "Come along," Victoria urged, her hand on my shoulder. "Tonight is a special occasion for you and your son." The guests formed a semicircle around the pond. Its surface reflected the garden lights, creating an admittedly beautiful scene. In the center stood a small stone fountain, with water cascading gently down its 3 tiers. "Everyone gather around," Victoria raised her glass high. "Today is a special day. A new life has joined our family." Relatives and friends applauded, smiling expectantly. I returned their smiles awkwardly, clutching Nathan protectively against my chest. "The Parker family has an ancient tradition," Victoria continued. "When welcoming a new family member, we use the purifying power of water to bless the baby." I noticed Dad's confused expression across the pond. Clearly, this tradition was news to him as well. "Now," Victoria said with a smile that made my skin crawl, "I want to teach Olivia her first lesson in parenting, that a mother's duty sometimes involves sacrifice." Murmurs of confusion spread among the guests. Victoria approached me, hands outstretched. "Let me see Nathan. Let Grandma hold him for the blessing." I instinctively stepped back. "Mother, he's sleeping. I don't think we should wake him for whatever this is." "Olivia." Victoria's voice carried that familiar steely coldness. "Are you defying me in front of everyone?" I felt the pressure of dozens of eyes on me. Years of conditioning made me waver, that familiar urge to please, to avoid making a scene. With reluctance that made me hate myself, I carefully handed Nathan to her. Victoria looked down at her grandson's face, really studying him for the first time. Something in her expression shifted, the rigid smile fading into something darker. "He's a handsome boy," she said quietly. Then her gaze snapped to me, eyes cold with sudden fury. "Having a baby before your sister. You've always been selfish," I gasped. "What?" "Be quiet," Victoria snapped. You've disrupted the family order." The guests began to back away, uncomfortable with the turn of events but unwilling to intervene. Mother decided I would have children first. Elise's voice came from beside the pond. She stood with a wine glass in hand, her face illuminated by the garden lights. "It's a family tradition. The younger daughter should have children before the firstborn. That's what Mother said." I stared at my sister in disbelief. "What are you talking about? There's no such tradition." "There is." Victoria's voice trembled with anger. "My mother was a second daughter, and so was I. That tradition should have been preserved." Dad stepped forward, his expression troubled. "Victoria, what are you saying? We have no such tradition in either of our families." "Be quiet, Richard." Victoria glared at him. "This has nothing to do with you." Her expression twisted as she looked down at Nathan. "I can't accept this child." My blood ran cold. "Mother, give Nathan back to me," I pleaded. But Victoria ignored me, moving slowly toward the pond. "A child who breaks tradition needs purification," she muttered. "Mother!" I cried out. "Stop! What are you doing?" Victoria's movements quickened. She reached the edge of the pond, still holding Nathan, her voice rising. Bad blood must be cleansed. Horror dawned on me as I realized her intent. I lunged forward, but it was too late. Victoria thrust Nathan forward and dropped him toward the water. "Water baptism for one with impure blood," she shouted. My scream tore through the evening air as I desperately tried to reach my son. Elise raised her wine glass and laughed. "Isn't this what you deserve?" Everyone seemed frozen in shock, everyone except Dad. He moved with a speed I'd never seen before, launching himself toward the pond. He caught Nathan before he hit the water, but the momentum carried them both in with a tremendous splash. "Dad!" I screamed, rushing to the edge. "Nathan!" Dad surfaced, holding Nathan's bundle high above the water. "It's okay," he gasped. "He's safe." I reached down and took Nathan with trembling hands, quickly pulling back the blanket. Miraculously, he was still sleeping peacefully, the thick fabric having shielded him from the sudden movement and noise. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. Turning around, I saw Victoria standing in shock, the reality of what she'd just done dawning on her face. I was just the tradition," she stammered. Elise stood silently beside her, equally stunned, her wine glass fallen and shattered at her feet. I hugged Nathan tightly and watched as Dad pulled himself from the pond, his clothes soaking wet, water streaming from him. But what struck me most was his face. His expression was one I'd never seen before. Pure, uncontained fury burned in his eyes as he stood to his full height and turned to face Victoria. "Olivia, go inside," he commanded in a low voice that brooked no argument. "Take Nathan to safety." I was startled by his tone. This wasn't the gentle, mild-mannered father I knew. This was someone else entirely. "But Dad, you're soaking wet now." His voice allowed no further discussion. I held Nathan protectively against my chest and hurried toward the house. Behind me, I heard my father's voice, cold and clear in the evening air. "For 35 years, I've kept silent. But now, it's over." I ran into the house with Nathan clutched to my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs. Inside, I leaned against the wall in the dimly lit hallway, trying to catch my breath. My hands trembled as I checked Nathan again, still miraculously asleep, unaware of how close he'd come to danger. Through the living room window, I watched the scene unfolding in the garden. The last few guests were hurriedly leaving, murmuring excuses and avoiding eye contact, eager to escape the family drama that had exploded into violence. No one wanted to be a witness to whatever came next. Dad stood before Mother and Elise, transformed by his anger. Gone was the mild-mannered literature professor who quoted Wordsworth at breakfast and apologized when others interrupted him. This man, drenched from the pond, his silver hair plastered to his forehead, his clothes clinging to his frame, radiated a fury I'd never witnessed. Victoria stared at him, her perfect composure fractured. "Richard, you don't understand," she said, her voice carrying through the open window. "I was only trying to preserve tradition. I didn't mean to harm Nathan. Don't lie." Dad's shout made me flinch. "You threw your own grandson into a pond. You call that tradition?" "I've studied both our family histories extensively. There is no such custom in either lineage." Elise stepped between them, her designer dress splattered with red wine. Dad, calm down. Mother was just confused. You were complicit. Dad's eyes burned into Elise. Always your mother's puppet. I've turned a blind eye to your cruelty toward Olivia all these years, but today, it ends. He grabbed Victoria's arm. Feel what you've done. Richard, what are you doing? Mother's eyes widened with fear. He pushed her toward the pond. You're the one who needs water purification. Dad, stop. Elise screamed and lunged to help Mother. Victoria stumbled backward, losing her balance. Elise tried to steady her, but both were too close to the pond's edge. In a horrifying moment, they tipped backward, falling into the water with twin splashes. Help! Victoria screamed, thrashing in the water. Both women struggled at the edge of the pond. Their expensive clothes saturated, makeup running down their faces. Dad stood frozen for a moment, seemingly shocked by his own actions, before snapping back to reality. He reached out, helping first Victoria, then Elise from the water. Both women collapsed onto the garden stones, sobbing and shivering. Their perfect facades had literally washed away. Mother's carefully styled hair hung in wet strings around her face, and Elise's mascara streaked down her cheeks like black tears. I turned away from the window, sinking to the floor with Nathan in my arms. My entire body shook with delayed shock and adrenaline. In the distance, I heard sirens approaching. Someone must have called the police. Within minutes, the flashing lights of police cars and ambulances lit up the driveway. Paramedics rushed in, followed by officers asking questions of the few remaining guests. I stayed hidden in the hallway, not ready to face any of them. Olivia? I looked up to find Dad standing in the doorway, his clothes still dripping. A paramedic had wrapped a silver emergency blanket around his shoulders, but he'd clearly refused further treatment until he found me. Are you both all right? He asked, his voice hoarse. We're fine, I whispered. But Dad, you're soaking wet. You need to change. Don't worry about me. He knelt beside us, placing a gentle hand on Nathan's head. For too long, I was a coward. I let them hurt you. I'll never let that happen again. A paramedic approached us. Ma'am, you and your baby should be checked at the hospital too, just to be safe. I nodded numbly. Dad, come with us? Of course, he answered. I'll follow in another ambulance. A police officer stepped into the hallway. Sir, ma'am, can you tell us what happened here tonight? Dad straightened his shoulders. My wife and younger daughter attempted to harm my grandson. The officer's expression hardened. That's a serious allegation. Can you provide details? After we get to the hospital, Dad replied firmly. My daughter and grandson's safety comes first. The officer nodded and escorted us outside. I climbed into an ambulance with Nathan, while Dad was led to another. Through the window, I glimpsed Mother and Elise being guided to a third ambulance, both wrapped in blankets similar to Dad's. As the ambulance pulled away, Nathan finally stirred and began to cry, his first real sound since the incident. I held him close, whispering comfort. I wasn't sure I believed myself. It's okay, baby. We're safe now. The hospital was a blur of activity. Nathan and I were taken to an examination room where doctors confirmed what seemed impossible. He was completely unharmed by the ordeal. Not even a scratch. Your son is perfectly fine, the doctor reassured me. Babies are more resilient than we often give them credit for. After they released us, I found Dad waiting in a small consultation room. His wet clothes had been replaced by hospital scrubs, and his hair had been towel-dried into uncharacteristic disarray. He looked both older and somehow younger than I'd ever seen him, as though he'd shed a skin he'd been wearing for decades. How's my brave boy? He asked, reaching for Nathan. I placed my son in his arms. The doctor says he's completely fine. It's a miracle. Not a miracle, Dad said softly. Just good fortune and quick reflexes. We sat in silence for a moment, the enormity of the evening settling over us. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind. Dad, why? Why did you stay silent all these years? He sighed deeply, his eyes reflecting decades of pain and regret. Shame is a powerful prison, Liv. I feared her. I loved her, even when I shouldn't have. It was blind devotion. He gazed tenderly at Nathan. But when I saw him in danger, everything changed. Now I have someone to protect, both of you. A knock at the door interrupted us. 2 police officers entered. a female detective with kind eyes and her male partner who stood near the door. "Miss Parker, Mr. Parker," the female detective said, sitting across from us. "I'm Detective Rivera. You've been through a tremendous ordeal tonight." I nodded, watching as she opened a small notebook. "Your father has given us some preliminary information about what happened, along with some context about your family's complex history." I stared down at my hands. I never imagined my family would come to this. Growing up in a toxic environment normalizes the abnormal, Detective Rivera said gently. "Your mother and sister have been transferred to the psychiatric ward for evaluation after treatment for mild hypothermia. However, we're also preparing charges." "What charges?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Child endangerment, attempted assault, and domestic abuse," her partner answered from the doorway. "Your father's testimony will be crucial, as will yours if you're willing to provide it. He says he's prepared to reveal the details of 35 years of psychological abuse." I exhaled shakily, feeling both terrified and relieved that long-buried family secrets would finally come to light. "Has Thomas been contacted?" I suddenly remembered my fiancé, halfway across the world. "Your father gave us his contact information," Detective Rivera confirmed. "The State Department is working to get a message to him in Sudan. From what we understand, he's arranging emergency leave to return on the next available flight." 2 days later, I found myself sitting in a hotel room paid for by the Police Victim Services Fund. Dad had taken the adjoining room, insisting on staying close. Nathan slept peacefully in a portable crib the hotel had provided, blissfully unaware of the chaos around him. My phone rang, Thomas's special ringtone. My heart leapt as I answered. "Thomas, can you hear me?" "Liv." His voice was distorted by the poor connection, but still recognizably his. "Thank God." "Are you okay? Is Nathan safe?" "We're both fine," I assured him, tears filling my eyes at the sound of his voice. "When are you coming home?" "I'm in Cairo now, catching a flight to London, then to the States. I should be there by tomorrow night." There was a pause. "Liv, I'm so sorry I wasn't there." "If I'd known your mother was capable of—" "You couldn't have known," I interrupted. "None of us saw it coming. Not even Dad. Your father saved our son," Thomas said, his voice cracking. "I don't know how I'll ever thank him. Just come home," I whispered. "We need you here." After the call ended, I went to check on Dad. He was sitting by the window in his room, staring out at the night sky, looking smaller somehow. "That was Thomas," I told him. "He'll be here tomorrow." Dad nodded. "Good. You need him now." I sat beside him. "The detective called while you were showering. Mother and Elise have been released from the hospital." I hesitated. "They're both under house arrest with ankle monitors. The preliminary hearing is set for next week." Dad closed his eyes briefly. "I've already given my statement. 35 years of enabling abuse. It's all there in black and white now." "You're not the villain in this story, Dad." "No, but I wasn't the hero either. Not until it was almost too late." He took my hand. "Olivia, I want you to know something. Whatever happens with the legal proceedings, whatever happens with Victoria and Elise, you and Nathan will never be alone. I'm going to be the father and grandfather I should have been all along." I rested my head on his shoulder, the way I used to do as a little girl before Mother would snap at me to sit up straight. "I know, Dad. Better late than never." The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of police statements, lawyer consultations, and sleepless nights. Thomas arrived as promised, walking through the hotel room door with haunted eyes and 3 days' worth of stubble. When I placed Nathan in his arms for the first time, he broke down completely. "He's perfect," Thomas whispered, tears streaming freely down his face. "I'm never leaving you two again." Thomas's presence steadied me in ways I hadn't realized I needed. His quiet strength and medical training made him a natural with Nathan, and watching them together, my fiancé singing softly to our son in the early morning hours, felt like glimpsing the family we could become once this nightmare ended. Dad moved to a separate hotel room to give us space, but joined us daily for meals. The 3 adults would sit together after Nathan was asleep, piecing through the wreckage of my family history. "I should have seen the signs," Thomas said one evening, medical training coloring his perspective. "From everything you've told me about Victoria, she's exhibited narcissistic behavior for years. You can't diagnose someone you've never met." I reminded him gently. Still, Dad interjected, his voice heavy with guilt. I lived with her for 35 years. I should have recognized how dangerous her control issues had become. The way she pitted the girls against each other, the constant criticism of Olivia, the bizarre favoritism toward Elise. I excused it all as just Victoria's way. I reached across the table for his hand. We all missed it, Dad. Even me, and I was her primary target. It was true. Despite years of Victoria's emotional manipulation, I'd never imagined she could become physically dangerous. Emotional abuse leaves no visible scars, making it easy to normalize over time. 1 week after the incident, I received an unexpected call from Elise's lawyer requesting a private meeting. Against Thomas's objections and with Dad's cautious support, I agreed to meet her at a cafe near our hotel. Elise looked nothing like the polished, perfect sister I remembered. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a plain sweater. Her hair hung straight and unstyled, and she wore no makeup. Without Victoria's influence, she seemed smaller somehow, more human. "Thank you for coming," she said, eyes downcast. "I wasn't sure you would." I sat across from her, keeping my distance. "Your lawyer said it was important." Elise nodded, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "I'm not going to defend Mother at the hearing next week." I blinked in surprise. "What?" "I've been meeting with a therapist since it happened." She finally looked up, and I was shocked to see genuine pain in her eyes. "Olivia, I'm starting to understand what Mother did to both of us all these years. How she used me against you. How she trained me to mirror her cruelty." I remained silent, unwilling to make this easier for her. "The therapist says Mother likely has narcissistic personality disorder, possibly with paranoid features." Elise's voice trembled. "She believes your pregnancy, triggered a psychotic break, especially because it threatened her control over the family narrative. That doesn't excuse what she did, what you both did." "No," Elise agreed quickly. "Nothing excuses it. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Olivia. I just wanted you to know that I'm testifying against her and myself. We deserve whatever punishment the court decides." I studied my sister's face, searching for the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to. Instead, I found only exhaustion and regret. "The lawyer says I'll likely get a reduced sentence if I cooperate," Elise continued. "Community service and mandatory therapy instead of jail time. Mother will face harsher consequences because she was the primary actor. And Marcus? Where is he in all this?" Elise's expression crumpled. "He's filed for divorce. Says he can't be married to someone who would harm a baby, even if I was just an accomplice." She wiped away a tear. "He's right to leave. The person I was that day, I don't want to be her anymore." Something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first seed of understanding. "The fertility treatments," I said quietly. "They weren't working?" Elise shook her head. 3 years, 5 rounds of IVF, nothing. When you announced your pregnancy," she trailed off. "You resented me, more than I've ever resented anyone," she admitted. "But the truth is, I've resented you since we were children, for being older, for having Dad's attention sometimes, for occasionally standing up to Mother when I never could. She cultivated that resentment deliberately, Olivia. She wanted us to hate each other." I absorbed her words, recognizing their truth. "So what happens now?" "I plead guilty to lesser charges. You get a restraining order against both of us, and we all try to heal separately." Elise reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope. "This is for Nathan. It's not much, just a college fund I've started for him. I know money doesn't fix anything, but it's a start. I didn't take the envelope. Keep it. If you're serious about making amends, use it for your therapy. Become someone better. That would be worth more to Nathan in the long run." She nodded and returned the envelope to her purse. "There's one more thing you should know. About Dad." My guard instantly went up. "What about him?" "Mother's planning to claim he was abusive to her for years. That's why she's napped that day. Her lawyer thinks she can avoid serious jail time with a mental health defense, especially if she can paint Dad as an abuser." Cold anger washed through me. "That's a lie." "Of course it is," Elise agreed. "But Mother's desperate and cornered. She'll say anything now." She hesitated. "I've already told the prosecutor I won't support her claims. In fact, I've given a full statement about Dad's passivity being part of the problem. How he never abused either of us or Mother, if anything. He failed to protect you from us. I sat back, processing the information. Thank you for the warning. As I stood to leave, Elise looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I know you can't forgive me yet. Maybe you never will. But I am sorry, Olivia, for everything. I simply nodded and walked away, emotions too tangled to form a proper response. The preliminary hearing arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Thomas, Dad, and I sat together on one side of the courtroom, while Victoria and her lawyer sat on the opposite side. Elise and her separate counsel were seated in between, symbolically and literally caught in the middle. Victoria looked nothing like the elegant, controlled woman I remembered. Her hair had been dyed a flat brown, presumably to appear more sympathetic to the judge. She wore minimal makeup and simple clothes, a far cry from her usual designer wardrobe. When our eyes briefly met, she quickly looked away. The proceedings began with the judge reviewing the charges. Victoria was being charged with attempted assault, child endangerment, and domestic abuse. Elise faced lesser charges as an accomplice. Both had entered initial pleas of not guilty by reason of temporary insanity, though Elise's lawyer indicated her plea might change. When Victoria was called to speak, she rose shakily, playing the part of a fragile older woman perfectly. Your Honor, she began in a tremulous voice, I was only trying to perform a family tradition, a water blessing for my grandson. I never intended to harm him. Miss S. Parker, the judge interrupted. Witnesses state you shouted about bad blood and purification while attempting to throw an infant into a decorative pond. Do you deny saying these things? Victoria hesitated. I was not in my right mind, Your Honor. Years of emotional abuse from my husband, objection. Our lawyer called out. There is no evidence of abuse by Mr. Parker and substantial evidence of Miss S. Parker's psychological abuse of her family members. The judge nodded. Sustained. Miss S. Parker, please restrict your comments to the events of the day in question. Victoria's facade cracked slightly, her eyes hardening. As I said, I was performing a traditional blessing. Richard overreacted and turned a beautiful family moment into a catastrophe. I felt Dad tense beside me. Thomas placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. When it was Elise's turn to speak, she surprised everyone by requesting to change her plea. Your Honor, I wish to plead guilty to all charges, she said clearly. I was complicit in my mother's actions and failed to protect my nephew. I am prepared to accept whatever consequences the court deems appropriate. Victoria's gasp was audible. Her lawyer quickly leaned over to whisper urgently in her ear. The judge turned to me. Miss Parker, as the mother of the endangered child, would you like to make a statement? I stood on shaking legs, notes forgotten in my hand. Looking directly at Victoria for the first time, I spoke from my heart. Your Honor, the events of that day were not an isolated incident, but the culmination of years of emotional abuse. My mother did not simply have a momentary lapse in judgment. She deliberately attempted to harm my son because his existence disrupted her control over our family. She has shown no genuine remorse, instead attempting to shift blame to my father, who saved Nathan's life. I took a deep breath. I am not vindictive. I don't want my mother in prison simply for punishment's sake, but I do believe she presents an ongoing danger to my child and potentially to others when her control is threatened. I ask the court to consider mandatory psychiatric treatment along with whatever other measures would ensure my family's safety. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, Miss Parker. As I returned to my seat, Victoria stared at me with cold fury in her eyes. For the first time, I met her gaze without flinching. The hearing concluded with the judge setting a trial date for Victoria and taking Elise's guilty plea under advisement pending a psychological evaluation. Both would remain under house arrest until further proceedings. Outside the courthouse, rain fell in a steady drizzle as we hurried to our car. Dad opened an umbrella over Thomas, who carried Nathan in his car seat. You did well in there, Dad told me, squeezing my hand. I'm proud of you. We all did well, I replied, watching Thomas settle Nathan safely in the car. We're getting through this together. That evening, as Nathan slept soundly in the hotel crib, Thomas pulled me onto the balcony of our room. The rain had cleared, leaving behind a clean, scented breeze and a sky full of stars. I've been thinking, he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "When this is all over, what would you think about moving west? Maybe Oregon or Washington? Somewhere with mountains and forests, far from here." I leaned back against his chest. "What about your practice? Your hospital position? They need doctors everywhere," he said simply. "And after Sudan, I'm thinking a smaller community hospital might suit me better anyway. Someplace where Nathan can grow up seeing trees instead of traffic." I turned in his arms, searching his face. "You're serious?" "Completely." He brushed hair from my face. "We can start fresh, Liv. All of us, including your dad if he wants to come. Build something new without all these shadows." For the first time in weeks, hope flickered within me, a small flame but steady. "I'd like that," I whispered, resting my forehead against his. A new beginning. 6 months passed like water flowing between cupped hands, impossible to hold on to, yet transformative in their passage. Nathan grew from a newborn into a curious infant, with a ready laugh and Thomas's hazel eyes. I watched my son develop with a mixture of joy and lingering fear, sometimes waking in the night just to check his breathing, haunted by how close we'd come to tragedy. The trial date for Victoria arrived on a crisp autumn morning. The trees lining the courthouse had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, a stark contrast to the gray stone building where my mother's fate would be decided. Thomas and I had agreed that Nathan would stay with Dad during the proceedings. The courtroom was no place for a baby, especially this one. "Are you ready?" Thomas asked, straightening his tie as we prepared to leave our temporary apartment. We'd been living in a furnished rental since leaving the hotel, unable to make permanent plans until the legal matters concluded. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, checking my reflection one last time. I'd chosen a simple navy dress, professional and serious without appearing vindictive. My lawyer had suggested I look appropriately affected but not vengeful. "Remember, you just need to tell the truth," Thomas said, taking my hand. "The facts are on your side." The courthouse seemed more imposing than during the preliminary hearing. News of the case had spread through the community, drawing a small crowd of onlookers and local reporters. Victoria Parker, respected community leader and charity organizer, on trial for attempting to harm her own grandson. It was the kind of story small-town papers thrived on. Our lawyer met us at the entrance, briefing us on last-minute developments. "Victoria's lawyer is still pushing the temporary insanity defense," she explained as we walked the corridor. "They've brought in a psychiatrist who claims she experienced a psychotic break triggered by family stress and undiagnosed mental health issues." "And Elise?" I asked. Following her guilty plea and cooperation, she's been sentenced to 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service, plus mandatory therapy. She'll be testifying for the prosecution today. Inside the courtroom, I saw Elise sitting in the witness area, hands folded in her lap. She looked up as we entered, offering a tentative nod which I returned after a moment's hesitation. Our relationship remained fragile. Not friendship, not reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Victoria sat beside her lawyer, dressed in a conservative gray suit that made her look older and more vulnerable than she was. When she turned and saw me, her expression revealed nothing. A blank mask that reminded me of the countless times she'd hidden her true feelings behind social propriety. The trial proceeded methodically. The prosecution outlined the events of that day, calling witnesses who had attended the party. Former friends and neighbors described Victoria's bizarre behavior and her comments about bad blood and tradition. Medical experts testified about Nathan's fortunate escape from harm and the trauma that could have resulted. When Elise took the stand, Victoria visibly stiffened. "Miss S. Collins," the prosecutor began, using Elise's married name despite her pending divorce, "please describe your relationship with your mother prior to the incident." Elise spoke clearly, her therapy sessions evident in her composed delivery. "My mother controlled our family through favoritism and fear. From childhood, she positioned me against my sister, rewarding me when I joined in criticizing Olivia and withdrawing affection when I showed her loyalty. And the supposed tradition regarding birth order? It never existed," Elise stated firmly. "Mother invented it when she learned of Olivia's pregnancy. She had always planned for me to have children first. to maintain her narrative of me as the superior daughter. When life didn't conform to her plan, she created a false tradition to justify her anger. Victoria's lawyer objected repeatedly, but Elise's testimony remained consistent. She described Victoria's escalating behavior in the months leading up to Nathan's birth, her rage. When learning of my pregnancy, her obsessive comments about family lineage, her growing fixation on the upcoming party. "Did you believe your mother intended to harm the baby that day?" the prosecutor asked. Elise hesitated, then nodded. Yes. In that moment, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. She wasn't just angry, she was determined to correct what she saw as a disruption to her authority. And her voice caught, I was so conditioned to support her that I didn't try to stop it until it was too late. When it was my turn to testify, I felt strangely calm. Looking at Victoria across the courtroom, I realized she seemed smaller than in my memories, diminished without her usual arsenal of manipulation tactics. I recounted my childhood, the pattern of emotional abuse, and the events leading to that terrible day. When the prosecutor asked how the incident had affected me, I spoke honestly. I have nightmares where I don't reach Nathan in time. I check his breathing multiple times each night. I flinch when people make sudden movements near him. I paused, collecting myself. But beyond the fear, there's grief. I've lost the mother I always hoped she could become and the sister I never truly had. My son will grow up without a grandmother's love, at least not from her. Victoria's testimony came last. She maintained her position that she had suffered a temporary break from reality and had only intended a symbolic blessing. When questioned about her history of controlling behavior, she deflected, presenting herself as a misunderstood woman who had only wanted the best for her family. I love my grandson, she insisted, a single tear tracking perfectly down her cheek. I would never intentionally harm him. The performance might have been convincing to those who didn't know her, but the evidence against her was substantial, bolstered by Elise's testimony and the multiple witness accounts. After 3 days of testimony, the jury returned with their verdict, guilty on all counts, with a recommendation for psychiatric evaluation before sentencing. Victoria showed no reaction as the verdict was read, her mask firmly in place. 2 weeks later, at the sentencing hearing, the judge addressed Victoria directly. Miss S. Parker, the psychiatric evaluations confirm you suffer from narcissistic personality disorder with paranoid features. While this explains some of your behavior, it does not excuse it. The judge adjusted her glasses. This court sentences you to 5 years in state prison, with the recommendation that you receive psychiatric treatment throughout your incarceration. Additionally, a permanent restraining order will be issued, prohibiting you from any contact with your daughter Olivia Parker or her son Nathan Bennett. Only then did Victoria's facade crack. You can't keep me from my family, she hissed, glaring at me. I am their mother, their grandmother. Remove the defendant, the judge ordered, and 2 officers stepped forward to escort Victoria from the courtroom. As she passed our table, Victoria paused, leaning down to whisper, This isn't over, Olivia. Family is forever. I met her gaze steadily. No, Mother, some things do end. This is one of them. It was the last time I would see Victoria Parker. Spring arrived with a burst of new beginnings. Thomas and I finalized our plans to move to Washington State, where he'd accepted a position at a community hospital in a small town near Seattle. Dad decided to come with us, retiring early from his teaching position to start fresh alongside his daughter and grandson. The day before our departure, I received an unexpected visitor. Elise stood on the doorstep of our rental, holding a small gift bag. I heard you're leaving tomorrow, she said, her voice tentative. I wanted to say goodbye and to give Nathan something. I invited her in, surprising myself. Nathan was napping, and Thomas and Dad were making a final run to the storage unit with boxes. The house sold, Elise explained, sitting carefully on the edge of the sofa. Dad's house, I mean. The new owners move in next month. I nodded. Dad had decided to sell the family home, neither of us wanting to keep a place with such painful memories. What will you do now? I asked. I've been accepted to a master's program in social work, she replied. I want to help children from dysfunctional families, if I can. My therapist thinks it might be healing. That sounds. Right for you, I said, genuinely meaning it. Elise handed me the gift bag. This is for Nathan. It's nothing fancy, just something I thought he should have. Inside was a handmade quilt, small enough for a child's bed. I recognized the fabric immediately, pieces from Dad's old university sweatshirts, bits of the curtains from our childhood playroom, even a square from the dress I'd worn to high school graduation. I found a box of old clothes and fabric in the attic while cleaning out the house, Elise explained. I thought, maybe Nathan should have something that connects him to the good parts of our family history. There weren't many, but they existed. I ran my fingers over the careful stitching. You made this? She nodded. Part of my therapy is finding constructive ways to channel emotions. Turns out, I'm not bad at quilting. She hesitated. There's a letter, too, in the envelope. For Nathan when he's older. Explaining who I am, what happened, and how sorry I am. You can decide when or if he ever reads it. I felt unexpected tears prick my eyes. Thank you, Elise. A small cry came from the baby monitor, and I excused myself to get Nathan. When I returned with him in my arms, Elise stood to leave. I should go. You have packing to finish. I surprised both of us by asking, would you like to hold him? Just once before we leave? Uncertainty and longing crossed her face. Are you sure? Yes, I said softly. People can change, Elise. I believe that now. With trembling hands, she accepted Nathan, holding him more naturally than I expected. Hello, little one, she whispered. Your mom and dad are taking you somewhere beautiful. You're going to have such a wonderful life. Nathan gazed up at her with curious eyes, then reached out to grab a strand of her hair. We both laughed, the sound unfamiliar but not unwelcome between us. After Elise left, I stood in the doorway watching her drive away. Nathan balanced on my hip. I didn't know if we would ever be close, if the damage of our past could ever fully heal. But for the first time, I believed we might both find our separate peace. The next morning dawned clear and bright for our journey west. Dad arrived early, helping Thomas load the last of our belongings into the moving truck. Nathan, strapped into his car seat, babbled happily at the activity around him. Ready for our new adventure? Thomas asked, slipping his arm around my waist as we took one last look at the apartment. More than ready, I replied, leaning into his embrace. Dad approached, car keys in hand. I thought I'd drive the first stretch if that works for everyone. Perfect, Thomas agreed, then checked his watch. We should hit the road if we want to make our stop in Ohio by nightfall. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched the familiar streets of my hometown recede in the side mirror. The past 6 months had reshaped my understanding of family, what it should be, what it shouldn't be, and most importantly, what it could become. In the seat beside me, Thomas reached over to take my hand, his thumb brushing over the engagement ring he'd finally placed there last week. Behind us, Dad was telling Nathan a silly story about a frog and a turtle, making my son giggle with delight. This, I realized, was what family truly meant. Not blood ties or tradition or control, but love freely given and wounds healed together. The road ahead would have its challenges, but for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who protected rather than harmed, who built up rather than tore down. Nathan's laughter filled the car as we crossed the state line, leaving behind the shadows of the past and driving steadily toward the promise of a new beginning. I turned away from the mirror and faced forward, eyes on the horizon and the future it held. Look, Nathan, I said softly. That's where we're going. That's our new home. The morning sun painted the highway gold before us, and we followed its light west. Story 2, in Ohio's Middletown. The white 2-story home of the Morrison family was situated in a peaceful area with verdant gardens. The entrance and weekends are decorated with seasonal flowers. The neighborhood would reverberate with the sound of Robert Morrison's painstakingly tended lawnmower. They embodied the American dream, which many people strive for. For more than a decade, Caroline had been employed as a nurse at the nearby Maine hospital. She was referred to as the angel nurse by her coworkers and patients for her compassion and dependability. She wore her blonde hair in a ponytail. Despite her weariness, she never failed to grin warmly. Robert, her husband, had worked as a construction site supervisor at Middletown Construction for 15 years, and both supervisors and subordinates valued his work. His robust physique and sun-kissed skin revealed a man who spent his weekends toiling in the field. He energetically coached the neighborhood Little League, promoting the growth of young people. "I completed my assignment, Mom. Will Dad be late today again?" From behind Caroline's supper preparations, Michael, her 9-year-old son, spoke up in the kitchen. He had a round face, brown eyes like his father, and was an inquisitive boy who did well in school arithmetic. Indeed. He said he had a site meeting this morning, Caroline said as she chopped vegetables. He should be home around 7. She intended to prepare a stew of potatoes and tiger flesh for Nicole. Robert liked it best. Emma is still in her room, right? Indeed. Ever since she returned home, she has remained there, her doors closed all the way. Do you know anyone who posts tales on YouTube and makes over $10,000 a month? Just a laptop, no voice, no face. If you're interested in Michael's remarks, I've included 2 links below. Caroline washed her hands and set down her knife. She had recently observed changes in Emma, her 14-year-old daughter. Although she had always been a conscientious and responsible youngster, she had suddenly lost her energy and appeared to be less hungry throughout the preceding month. Were the problems typical of adolescence? Although Caroline was worried, she made an effort to preserve her daughter's privacy by not interfering too much. "Emma, we're almost done with dinner. Come on down." She went upstairs to her room and knocked on the door. When Emma emerged through the door that opened a moment later, there was a tiny nod in agreement. She appeared slimmer. Her cheekbones were starting to peek through her once healthy, lush cheeks. "Have you completed your assignment?" "The majority of it. Later, I'll complete it. Do not be concerned." Emma refused to look at him and spoke in a little voice. She used to be the basketball team's ace, but lately she had started skipping practices, claiming to be exhausted. Emma recoiled a little as Caroline put her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You are welcome to chat to me about anything that is upsetting you. I'm willing to listen at any time. I'm all right, Mom." Simply exhausted. Emma gave a little smile that stopped short of her eyes. Robert arrived home at around 6:30 when the front door opened. Michael hurried out to his father as his firm voice reverberated throughout the house. "I'm home. Dad, I passed today's arithmetic test with a perfect score. My boy is that." Laughing, Robert raised his kid high in the air. Then he went to the kitchen and kissed Caroline on the cheek. "Well done today. Kuja smells amazing, Nick. It's your favorite. Wash your hands now." It's prepared. Around the dining table, the 4 members of the family recapped their days. They saw this every day. At school, Michael enthusiastically shared his findings, while Robert told stories of the construction site in a comical manner. Emma, on the other hand, hardly touched her food and only responded briefly to inquiries. "Emma, consume more food. Eating too little is bad for your health," Robert added. Emma gave a little nod and made herself eat a few more bits, but she quickly thanked them for the food and made an attempt to get up from the table. "Dessert is still available, though." Caroline spoke in concern. "I need to do my schoolwork. Later, I'll eat it." Emma was heard ascending the stairs. Caroline and her spouse looked at each other. Robert scowled but remained silent. After the kids had gone to bed that evening, Emma's room was passed by Caroline. Soft crying reached her ears. She was hesitant to knock, but she made the decision to have a detailed conversation with her tomorrow after school, so she went to her own bedroom. Caroline was moving quickly down the crowded hospital hallway, swerving between nurses and physicians to look at patient files. She had been occupied all morning with the admission of 3 post-operative patients to the surgical ward. "The patient in room 303 is calling for you, Caroline," Jennifer, her coworker, yelled. Caroline gave a nod and veered off course. She noticed that it was about time for her lunch break today by checking her watch. For the first time in a long time, she had arranged to eat lunch in the cafeteria with her coworkers. Caroline's life abruptly altered around 2:15 p.m. on a typical Tuesday. "There's a call for you, Morrison." Susan from reception hurried over and said, "It's from the school." Caroline's chest constricted as she saw the strain on her face. She took up the receiver and heard a woman's frantic voice. "This is Middletown High School's school nurse, Miss S. Morrison. Emma, your kid, passed out during physical education. She has extremely bad color, yet she is conscious. We have also summoned an ambulance. Westside General Hospital is where they're going." Caroline's face drained of blood. "What? Emma? Indeed. It appears to be anemia. Although she claimed to have been feeling ill since this morning, she took part in class. After a few minutes of running, she abruptly passed out. Despite her anxiety, Caroline made an effort to restore her calm as a nurse. "I get it. I'll go there immediately." She instantly informed her boss, Martha, of the problem after disconnecting up. Being an understanding supervisor, Martha responded, "Go ahead. Right away. Family comes first." Still wearing her uniform, Caroline snatched up her bag and sprinted to the parking lot. "Robert," she called her husband as she started the car's engine. Although he was managing a sizable construction site and wasn't always able to respond right away, Robert was able to recognize the third ring today. "Caroline, what's the matter? Making a call at this hour?" At school, Emma passed out. She was transported by EMS to Westside Hospital. Robert's low, anxious voice came over the phone after a brief period of stillness. "What? Why?" "The specifics are unknown to me yet. She seemed to have fainted during physical education due to anemia. Class. I'm going to exit the site now. In an hour, I'll be in the hospital." "Okay. I'm now en route there. When I find out, I'll give you a call." Caroline hurried to the counter when she arrived at the hospital's emergency room. "I am the mother of Emma Morrison. I was informed that an ambulance had taken my daughter here." After a brief check of her computer, the receptionist responded, "Your daughter is being tested right now. Kindly wait in the designated waiting area. You will talk to the doctor soon." Holding her breath, Caroline sat in the waiting area. Although she had seen many families of emergency patients in her time as a nurse, the worry and anguish she experienced were unimaginable. A middle-aged physician wearing a white coat eventually called her name. "Morrison, Mrs. Emma's mom." "My name is Martin, the doctor." The doctor gestured for Caroline to sit as they entered an examination room. "Emma is steady and conscious right now. She is, however, very malnourished and anemic. She now has a hemoglobin level of 8.2 GDL as a medical practitioner." This was a hazardous level, Caroline knew. "How?" she stumbled. "Has your daughter recently been eating healthily? Has there been a rapid decrease in weight?" Caroline took a deep breath. Emma had, in fact, appeared to be lacking in appetite lately. Caroline hadn't considered it this severe, but she had started leaving more food on her plate. "I assumed that her recent lack of appetite was only a passing stage of puberty." Dr. Martin gave a soft nod. "Adolescents frequently experience changes in their dietary habits. But in Emma's situation, the problem could be more complicated than a simple lack of appetite. There may be psychological tension or worry." Just then, Emma's homeroom teacher, Miss Jones, knocked on the door and came in. She was a tall woman who taught Emma's class English and had an intelligent air. "Morrison, Miss S. I apologize for the incident. I arrived straight from school." Caroline got up and shook the teacher's hand. "Thank you." "Emma, how are you doing in school?" Miss Jones paused for a moment before responding. "In fact, Emma has changed in ways that worry me lately. She has been less active in class, spending more time by herself and socializing with peers less. Additionally, her grades have begun to suffer." The teacher and Dr. Martin exchanged glances that made Caroline uncomfortable. "Are things going wrong at home?" Quietly, Miss Jones inquired. As far as Caroline knew, she was speechless. There were no special issues in their quiet home. Despite his occasional strictness, Robert's affection for the kids was undeniable. "Nothing that comes to mind. Let's await the outcome of the exam." Dr. Martin stepped in. "Right now, the most important things are rest and nourishment. She will require many days in the hospital." Caroline requested a visit with her daughter. Four was attached to Emma's arm as she lay in bed in a medical gown, appearing smaller than normal and with a pale face. When Mom Emma saw Caroline, she started crying. "I apologize for causing you anxiety." Caroline held her daughter's icy hand while sitting next to her. "Emma, don't worry," simply said, "I'm relieved you're safe. What caused this to occur? Do you have anything you would like to discuss?" Emma looked away a little and answered feebly, "I was simply worn out. I'm all right. Do not be concerned." The hospital room door opened at that very time, and Robert hurried in panting. "Are you all right, Emma?" The brief display of strain on Emma's face was not missed by Caroline. Was it astonishment or fear? "Dad, I'm all right. It's simply anemia." I was worried, Robert replied, placing his fingers on his daughter's forehead. You must eat healthily. He seemed worried, but there was also a hint of accusation in his voice. In the corridor, Caroline looked at her husband and shared the doctor's details. We have healthy meals at home, so there shouldn't be any issues, Robert remarked with a grimace. Most likely it's just youthful whims. However, Caroline started to worry that they could be missing something. The light coming in through the window of the hospital room was slowly becoming orange in the late afternoon. Caroline watched Emma's sleeping face from a chair by her bed. After testing and drip feeding, Emma was finally able to sleep well. Her color appeared to have slightly improved, but her face remained pale. In the late afternoon, Robert had left the hospital, stating that he needed to return to the site for a crucial meeting. He was requested to pick up Michael and take care of supper by Caroline, choosing to remain in the silent hospital room oneself. Caroline's head was full with questions. Emma's quick weight loss, deteriorating academic performance, less social engagement, and most importantly, the occasionally noticeable nervous look in her eyes. Caroline kept feeling as though something was missing. Had her hectic days caused her to miss crucial signs? Am I not a good mother? Softly, she whispered. Just then, the door to the hospital room opened softly. Caroline was a little taken aback to see the individual at the door as she turned around. It was a middle-aged man dressed in khaki slacks and a navy jacket. His placid countenance and peaceful manner belied the keen observing capability in his eyes. Could I have a little talk with you, Miss S? Morrison? The man's voice was soft. After taking a quick look at Emma's dozing face, Caroline got up and responded. Indeed, without a doubt. As Caroline walked out of the room, the door silently closed behind her as the man gestured her into the corridor. Jim Collins, detective. The man identified himself and presented his ID. Caroline was perplexed. Officers, has anything taken place? After surveying the area, Detective Collins guided her to a quiet area of the corridor. Although his face remained kind, his manner had a definite seriousness to it. This was discovered in your daughter's uniform pocket, MAAM. I'm saying this. He gave her a little piece of folded notepaper. The edges of the paper were a little torn from repeated folding. Caroline took it and unfolded it with shaking hands. It looked like an entry from October 15th, in Emma's characteristic round handwriting. Another hole in the wall of the living room. Dad screamed again today. I'm to blame. I am at my breaking point. I have no desire to attend school. I'd rather not see anyone. I'd rather not eat. I wish to vanish. After catching her breath, Caroline flipped to the next page. On October 18th, there were thorough records of domestic activities. Dad was drinking again after Michael went to bed, and Mom worked the night shift. He pulled my hair when I complained that the TV was too loud. Despite the pain, I was unable to speak. I was careful not to wake Michael. October 20 honest. Dad was feeling upbeat today. He was nice. I hope more days like this one come. However, I'm worried about when he'll lose his temper. Eating always makes me nervous. I'm feeling ill. Caroline's eyesight became blurry and her hands shook. Robert, was this accurate? To Emma. Emma's quick recoil was connected in her mind by jumbled recollections. The anxiety that pervaded the air upon Robert's return home, inexplicable wall holes or broken furnishings. Detective Collins went on in silence. Additionally, your daughter's physical injuries, significant weight loss, and falling grades have been noted by the school's instructors as worrying. After pausing to gauge Caroline's response, he spoke again in a hushed tone. Family problems, especially abuse, are a common cause of eating disorder symptoms. Caroline gave a headshake. No, it is incorrect. Robert is a devoted, family-focused dad. He even does community service as a volunteer. He adores Emma. There must be an error. She was trembling as she said. She was aware that she was attempting to persuade herself with what she was saying. Do not tell your husband under any circumstances, Detective Collins replied gravely, staring directly into her eyes. This is a component of an inquiry. The safety of your child comes first. Caroline slumped against the wall of the corridor, frightened. I didn't notice. Whether this is accurate. Her eyes filled with tears. How come I didn't notice? Don't blame yourself, Mrs. Morrison. Detective Collins spoke softly. Victims, particularly children, may keep quiet out of embarrassment or fear, and domestic abusers frequently present a whole different image to others outside the house. He went on to explain that your child's anemia is the result of an eating disorder brought on by the emotional stress they are going through. This is also consistent with the doctor's diagnosis. Caroline hugged her knees and stared blankly down the corridor as she slid down the wall to the floor. At the same moment as something was starting to stir, something inside her was disintegrating. How can I keep her safe? Caroline was kneeling next to Detective Collins. First, remain composed and use clear thinking. Additionally, kindly assist us. A representative from Child Protective Services will arrive shortly. We will coordinate our response with a group of experts. Caroline thought about her husband's actions every day. He was violent against Emma, but he was also rigorous at home, especially with her. She remembered bits and pieces of Robert's short fuse and his growing hostility after drinking. During her night shifts, what had been going on at home? Morrison, Miss S. Her thoughts were interrupted by Detective Collins's voice. The most important things at the moment are your child's safety and their physical and emotional healing. Together, we will determine the most effective strategy. Caroline rose slowly and turned to face Emma's hospital room door. How do I respond to Emma? For the time being, it's crucial that you support her and remain by her side. She will soon meet with a specialist counselor. Let's establish a space for her to express her experiences in her own words, Detective Collins said, and to repeat, lowering his voice even more. Please don't talk to your husband about this. It's crucial to continue acting normally until proof can be gathered. Caroline brushed away her tears and inhaled deeply. Despite her mental anguish, she was certain that she had to do all in her power to keep her kids safe. I get it. I'll comply, Detective Collins remarked. Please go back to the hospital room now, and nodded with relief. The person from Child Protective Services will be there shortly. We are available to you. With quivering hands, Caroline placed her palm on the hospital room door and folded Emma's note, putting it in her pocket. She paused for a second. Now her life would alter drastically, but she had to face any challenges for the sake of her daughter's safety. She inhaled deeply before softly opening the door. Emma was still asleep. Caroline took her daughter's little hand and sat in the chair near the bed. Emma had been released from the hospital a week earlier. Caroline was attempting to spend as much time at home as possible and had temporarily cut back on her hospital duties. Emma was eating well-balanced meals and getting lots of sleep as directed by her doctor. She had also started seeing a specialist counselor twice a week as she gradually recovered her strength. The Morrison family appeared to be getting back to normal on the surface, but Caroline's heart was blazing like a fury. Caroline stood at the living room window one evening after the kids had gone to bed, gazing out at the shadowy garden. Usually, she and Robert would use this time to talk about their weekend plans or watch TV together. Now, however, she was afraid of her husband and mistrustful of him. When Caroline heard Robert's words, she turned to see him seated on the couch, staring at her while holding a drink. "What's on your mind? Lately, you've been behaving oddly." Caroline faked a grin. "It isn't anything. All I'm concerned about is Emma. Is Emma doing well on her recovery?" "You're overly concerned." Changing the TV channel, Robert stated. "I'll be late, by the way, since I have a drinking party tomorrow night. Kindly review Michael's assignment." "Yes, I do comprehend." Caroline fixed her gaze on Robert's features. She recognized her husband's appearance, but her perception of him had changed. This man had scared Emma's kid, pulled her hair, and smashed holes in the wall. This information was still hard to comprehend. Caroline was scheduled to meet in secret at a cafe the following morning with Detective Collins and Child Protective Services Louisa Sanders. She went to the meeting spot after Robert had departed for work and the kids had been sent to school. "Come on over, Mrs. Morrison." She was met at a secluded corner table by Detective Collins and Louisa. They greeted one another, and Louisa spoke softly first. "How was this previous week, Caroline? Have there been any recent developments?" Caroline inhaled deeply. Emma is improving little by bit. But even with Robert at home, she remains nervous. She hesitated for a second. "I put a lock on Emma's stores inside last night. I told Robert that it was out of consideration for her privacy." Detective Collins gave a nod. Sound judgment. The most important thing is your children's safety. Let's discuss what comes next. We must have proof of domestic abuse before moving further with legal proceedings. Louisa noted as she opened the file. This is a challenging procedure without your assistance. What ought I to do? Caroline seemed resolute as she asked, I want you to put these in your house first. She was given a tiny package by Detective Collins. There were many little cameras and recording equipment within. Keep these hidden in public areas such as the entryway and living room. Don't put them in bathrooms or bedrooms. Louisa went on. Additionally, set up one-on-one conversations with Emma and urge her to discuss previous experiences. Respect her position during the 2-hour talk, but don't push her. Caroline gained knowledge of certain techniques for gathering evidence, her legal alternatives, and above all, the psychiatric treatment of her kids. Fear and resolve mixed in her heart, but the next day she made it obvious that she wanted to defend her kids. While Robert was away, she started acting. She placed tiny cameras on top of the kitchen cabinet, behind the TV, in the living room, and in the shadow of the bookcase. She made time to sit by herself in the yard and speak softly to Emma. You may tell me anything, Emma. Mom is on your side. Emma was guarded at first, but she started to open up with time. I assumed my father's anger was a result of my misbehavior. However, according to Lisa, my counselor, it is untrue. Yes, exactly. Emma, there was nothing wrong with you. For the following 3 weeks, Caroline disguised her emotions whenever she gave her daughter a hug. Caroline proceeded to collect evidence with caution. Robert was shown on camera acting menacingly toward Emma, increasing his voice, and most startling of all, punching the wall. When Michael's homework was incorrect, after examining these pieces of evidence, Louisa and Detective Collins concluded that there were enough legal reasons. Caroline started thinking about filing for divorce and made plans to relocate the kids to a secure location with them. The day before the plan was put into action, Caroline told her longtime friend Sarah the truth and made arrangements for a safe haven in case of need. For the first time, Caroline felt a small burden lifted when Sarah remarked, "Come to our house anytime if anything happens." After the kids had gone to bed that evening, in her room she was preparing a tiny suitcase with necessities. The plan called for her to pick up the kids and seek safety at Sarah's place tomorrow afternoon when Robert was at work. But she was denied that opportunity by fate. She glanced at the clock as she heard the front door open. 9 p.m. It is too soon for Robert to return home. Caroline? As soon as a shout came from below, the bag was swiftly hidden in the closet. She went down the steps. In the main room stood Robert. His eyes were bloodshot from booze, and his face was crimson with rage. What is this? He hurled his cell phone in her direction. Louisa's note on rescheduling the meeting for tomorrow was shown on the screen. Caroline's face was emptied of blood. You're doing what behind my back? Robert came over to her. The stench of alcohol was overpowering. Really? Nothing. Caroline took a step back. Don't tell lies. A picture frame collapsed and broke as Robert hit the wall. Aren't you attempting to separate Michael and Emma from me? Caroline's voice was shaking as she spoke. Robert, please quiet the kids. Just then, a voice called out from the top of the steps. That's sufficient. Emma was standing at the top of the steps when she turned around. Enough. Stop causing harm to Mom and us, Dad. The window in the living room let in the gentle spring sunlight. Michael was playing in the front yard while Caroline stood at the window of her new house. It had been a year since that evening. A smaller but cozier home in a different Ohio town. For the Morrisons, it was a place of fresh starts. Look, Mom, I completed the outfit. Emma bounded down the steps. She was holding a costume she had prepared for the performance of the school theatrical club. Emma's eyes were vibrant once more, and her face had regained its healthy shine. It's stunning. Emma, ideal for you. Caroline gave her daughter a hug. Everything changed that evening when Emma had the guts to confront her father. Robert was arrested during the ensuing trial after Detective Collins and his colleagues hurried in. After being found guilty, he was mandated to complete a domestic violence rehabilitation program and serve time in prison. After the divorce was finalized, Caroline carried on with her nursing career and started a new life with her kids. Their wounds were being healed by weekly therapy sessions, and they were making modest but steady progress. Today, mail arrived. On the kitchen table, Emma gestured toward an envelope. When Caroline saw the sender's name, she scooped it up and inhaled deeply. Robert Morrison sent it. 3 months earlier, Robert had begun writing letters after finishing the program. He expressed his sincere regret and acceptance of responsibility for his acts in the first letter. He talked about how his own father had mistreated him and that he felt guilty for not ending the pattern. At first, Caroline considered disregarding the letters. But for the benefit of the children's future, particularly Michael, who periodically inquired about his father, she felt compelled to face the past. Emma said, "You don't have to open it, Mom. It's all right. We're on our way." Caroline opened the envelope with a smile. Robert's recovery efforts and his desire to gradually mend his relationship with the children were described in the letter. After reading it through to the end, Caroline folded it up softly. "What are you going to do?" Emma inquired. "I want to make a decision, but I'm not sure yet." While conferring with each of you, there, Caroline peered out the window. Michael was playing briskly with the kids in the neighborhood. She grinned. Over the last year, she has come to realize that family is about more than simply genetic ties. It's also about respecting, protecting, and having the guts to adapt when needed. She and her kids would no longer live in dread, but only time would tell if Robert had really changed. "Everything will work out." Caroline touched the shoulder of her daughter. "Together, we have triumphed and will keep going." A new season was heralded by the spring wind outside.